The gift of weakness, the chamber of the Galactic Council was built to inspire fear, with its towering pillars and cold metallic echoes that carried every whispered judgment across the vast floor. Delegates from 100 species watched in silence as the human soldier was brought forward, his boots ringing on the steel. He stood tall, broad-shouldered and calm, refusing to bow even when faced with the sneers of alien lords who believed they had finally found a way to break one of Earth's finest. Humans had earned their reputation as the unyielding warriors of the galaxy, impossible to tame, impossible to defeat, but the Council was clever and cruelty was their sharpest weapon. Before him stood a girl. She was small by any measure, fragile compared to the hulking soldiers around her. Her skin shimmered faintly, a pale tone that looked almost translucent under the harsh lights, and her frame trembled as if even the weight of her own breath was too much to bear. She was shackled by thin restraints, though anyone could see they were unnecessary. She could not have resisted even a child. The delegates leaned forward, their eyes glittering with the satisfaction of a cruel spectacle about to unfold. "This," the High Chancellor said, his voice carrying with the strength of a hammer, "is the weakest among the Varathi, a species already frail and forgotten. We gift her to the human warrior, not as honor, but as burden. Let him carry her weakness, let it crush him. Let his pride collapse beneath her fragility. Watch now how even a human will bend when his strength is made useless." The chamber rippled with mocking laughter. To every alien watching, this was not a gift but a curse. A soldier like him lived for battle, for glory, for the test of strength. To chain him to something so feeble was to deny him purpose, to bleed away his spirit. That was their plan, to break him without bloodshed. The human's name was Marcus Hale, veteran of Terran defense and survivor of battles that had torn entire fleets apart. He did not answer their laughter. His eyes settled on the girl, and for a moment he felt a strange shift in the air. Her head was lowered, silver hair falling across her face, but then she looked up. And she smiled. It was not the smile of defiance or the twisted grin of someone hiding malice. It was soft, fragile, almost shy. Yet in that one expression there was something that should not have been possible. In her smile, Marcus saw life. Not weakness, not fear, but something that felt like a quiet strength hidden beneath layers of fragility. The counselors did not see it. To them she was a tool. To him she was suddenly a mystery. He stepped forward, took the chain from the guards, and released it from her wrists. A murmur spread across the chamber at his audacity. No one freed a gift of the council, yet Marcus did so without hesitation. The girl's wrists bore faint red marks where the restraints had pressed too tightly, and she rubbed them slowly, looking at him with wide violet eyes. She whispered something in a language few could understand, but he caught the meaning in her tone. Gratitude. The Chancellor scowled, slamming his staff against the floor to silence the murmurs. "You may take her, human. Remember this moment, for it is the first step toward your undoing." Marcus gave no reply. He placed a steadying hand on the girl's shoulder and led her out of the chamber, the echoes of alien laughter following them like shadows. Yet his mind lingered not on their mockery, but on that simple smile. It unsettled him in ways no enemy ever had. He had faced fleets, warlords, and weapons designed to erase entire cities, yet none of them had stirred this kind of unease. Outside the council hall, the girl walked beside him with steps that seemed unsteady but never faltered. He could sense her fragility, but there was also a strange rhythm in the way she moved, as though weakness was only the surface of something deeper. She glanced up at him again, offering another smile, and he realized it was not accidental. It was deliberate. She wanted him to see something. He wondered if the council had made a mistake. The corridors stretched on, guarded by alien soldiers who glared at the sight of him with their so-called gift. But Marcus did not feel burdened. He felt the stirrings of something he could not yet name. The girl's presence was light, yet in some unexplainable way she carried weight. Not the weight of weakness, but of meaning. Her smile meant something. He just did not yet know what. The burden that grew. Lighter Marcus led the girl away from the towering spires of the council chambers and out into the endless corridors of the orbital station. Every step they took was under the watchful eyes of guards and officials who whispered among themselves. They expected him to sneer at her, to cast her aside, to feel shame at being saddled with something so frail. Instead, he walked steadily beside her, his hand never far from her shoulder, not in dominance but in quiet reassurance. She said little, but her presence filled the silence in ways Marcus found difficult to explain. He guided her to the quarters assigned to him, a bare, metallic room meant more for a soldier's rest than for comfort. She entered hesitantly, as though expecting to be struck down at any moment. Marcus closed the door behind them and finally spoke. His voice was calm, deep, carrying the weight of command and years of battle. "What is your name?" The girl lowered her head before answering, her voice a fragile whisper. "Lyra." The sound was delicate, yet it carried something that made him pause. He had expected a voice as brittle as her appearance, but there was a clarity in it that caught him off guard. He nodded once, setting down the small ration pack he had been given. She eyed it with quiet hunger, though she made no move to take it until he pushed it toward her. She ate in small, careful bites, as if every morsel was a treasure she did not deserve. Watching her stirred something Marcus had long buried beneath years of soldiering. Pity was too simple a word. It was more like responsibility, as if fate itself had placed her in his path. Days passed and the council's guards checked often, expecting to see Marcus broken under the weight of his so-called gift. Yet he did not waver. He began to learn small things about Lyra. She flinched at sudden noises, yet never cried out. She walked with short, careful steps, yet never stumbled. She seemed weak, yet there was patience in her silence, as though she was waiting for something. He found himself watching her smile more than he intended, each time feeling the strange strength it carried. One evening, as the stars drifted beyond the narrow viewport of his quarters, she spoke again. "You do not hate me." It was not a question, more like a statement she herself could not understand. Marcus shook his head slowly. "No, I do not hate you. They think you are weakness, but I do not see you that way." She smiled softly, and for the first time he saw a faint shimmer in her eyes, as though something far greater lay behind them. Her voice lowered, almost conspiratorial. "My people were once different. We were not always weak. We were made this way." Marcus leaned forward, curiosity sharpening his thoughts. Made this way by who? Her smile did not falter, but her gaze shifted toward the door as though fearful of unseen ears. "Long ago the council feared us, they broke us, they took everything and left us shadows of what we were. But something remains." Marcus studied her carefully. He had seen soldiers broken by war and empires shattered by ambition, yet Lyra's words carried the ring of truth. If the council had deliberately weakened her people, then she was more than a burden. She was proof of a lie that stretched across the galaxy. The following days confirmed his suspicions. Whenever she smiled, he felt a strange warmth, a pulse-like energy hidden beneath her fragile frame. It was not visible to others, but he sensed it, as though her smile awakened something in him he had forgotten. The burden he was supposed to carry did not weigh him down. Instead, it grew lighter with every passing moment, until he realized it was not a burden at all. It was a gift disguised as weakness. The guards continued to laugh behind his back, but Marcus no longer cared. In Lyra's quiet words, he heard the echoes of something dangerous to the council, something they had tried to bury but could not erase. Her smile was not simply a gesture of kindness. It was the key to a forgotten strength, and Marcus knew without question that the day would come when the council would regret ever placing her in his hands. Whispers of the forgotten bloodline, the council believed their cruel gift would slowly crush Marcus's spirit, but instead, something unexpected began to spread. Whispers. They started among the guards first, then among the servants who moved through the station, and finally across the fleets that circled the great orbital city. The story of the human who had not rejected the weakest alien girl was too strange to be ignored. The more they watched the pair, the more they felt something was wrong with the council's judgment. She should have been nothing, a fragile burden too pitiful to notice. But her presence beside the human soldier carried a weight no one could explain. Lyra remained quiet most of the time, but when she smiled, it unsettled those who looked at her. Her smile was soft, kind, almost harmless. Yet some who saw it claimed their hearts trembled as if they were staring at something ancient. Marcus noticed this effect often. Guards who had mocked her before now hesitated in her presence, their insults faltering on their tongues. Servants who once ignored her now bowed their heads without realizing they were doing it. The council dismissed it as foolish superstition, but Marcus knew better. He could feel it himself each time her lips curved upward in that calm and steady smile. One night he questioned her again. They were in his quarters, the hum of the station engines vibrating faintly through the walls. "You said your people were once different." "What did you mean?" Lyra looked down at her hands, pale and trembling. For a moment Marcus thought she would stay silent, but then she lifted her gaze and whispered, "We were once the first voice. Long before the council formed, my people ruled the skies. We were not weak. We were leaders. The galaxy bent to our songs, but power breeds fear and fear breeds chains. The council did not defeat us with strength. They changed us. They made us forget what we were." Her words struck him like a hidden blade. He had heard legends of the first voice, an ancient people whose songs could move stars and sway entire armies. But he had dismissed them as myth. Now he wondered if the council had buried more than stories. If Lyra spoke truth, then the frail girl they had given him was not weakness at all. She was the last fragment of something dangerous enough to terrify empires. Marcus leaned closer, his voice steady but urgent. "If this is true, why tell me?" Her smile returned, gentle yet piercing. "Because you are not afraid. Others would kill me if they knew. But you hold no chains. You look at me and see more than fragility. You see me?" He could not deny it. Somewhere deep inside, he had always sensed there was something beyond her fragile form, something that made every instinct of a soldier scream to protect her. It was not pity. It was recognition. Outside his quarters, rumors spread faster. Some whispered she was cursed. Others whispered she was blessed. A guard who had laughed at her one day woke in the night screaming from dreams of violet fire. A council scribe claimed he saw her reflection in the mirror glow with a crown of light. Fear and curiosity began to spread in equal measure. The council noticed and began to tighten their grip, sending spies and shadow agents to watch the pair more closely. Marcus did not care. He continued to stand beside her, his presence shielding her from open attack. Each day he grew more certain that fate had placed her in his hands for a reason. Each day her smile grew more dangerous to those who thought themselves rulers of the galaxy. When he looked into her eyes, he no longer saw the weakest alien girl. He saw a bloodline that had been shackled for centuries, a truth the council feared more than war itself. He realized that if she ever truly awakened what was buried inside her, the galaxy would never be the same. And he also realized something else. The council had not given him a burden to break him. They had given him a weapon they did not understand. The council's fear, the Galactic Council, was never blind to whispers. Their spies carried words faster than light, feeding every rumor into the ears of the High Chancellor. When the first reports reached him that guards hesitated around the human and his fragile companion, he dismissed it as weakness of discipline. When scribes claimed her reflection shimmered like a crown of light, he called it nonsense. But when entire crews began to speak of her smile, as if it carried a weight they could not explain, the Chancellor's calm began to crack. The Council had built its empire on fear, and fear was now shifting away from them toward a single girl they had branded as worthless. That was not something they could allow. In the shadowed chamber of judgment, the Council met in secret. Alien voices hissed and growled, arguing over what should be done. Some wanted her executed at once before her name spread further. Others demanded silence, insisting it was only superstition. Yet the very fact that they argued at all proved the depth of their fear. Finally, the Chancellor struck his staff upon the floor and silenced them. His eyes burned with cold anger. If this child is what the rumors claim, then she is a danger far greater than any fleet. She must be erased before her smile grows into a storm. That night, assassins were sent. They were not the crude killers of back-alley mercenary bands, but the sharpened knives of the Council's most secret order. Silent, skilled, and unrelenting, they moved like shadows through the orbital station. Their orders were simple: end the girl, leave the human broken, erase the whispers. Yet fate has a way of breaking plans forged by fear. Marcus was not sleeping when the assassins came. He had learned long ago that danger never waits for dawn. The faint scrape of a door, the subtle shift of air, these were sounds only a soldier trained by endless war would notice. He rose without a word, pulling Lyra behind him just as the first blade struck the air where she had been lying. His hand shot out, catching the assassin's wrist, twisting with brutal efficiency until the weapon clattered to the ground. The room exploded into violence. Blades flashed in the dim light. Figures cloaked in darkness moved with lethal speed, but Marcus moved faster. He had fought in trenches where artillery never ceased, had boarded ships where air burned from ruptured hulls, had bled and survived in places where no human should stand. Every skill he had learned poured into that moment as he defended the girl behind him. Lyra clutched her hands to her chest, eyes wide not with terror but with something else, a glow that seemed to pulse from within her. One assassin lunged toward her, slipping past Marcus's guard. Before his blade could reach her, she smiled. The glow in her eyes spread into the air like a ripple across still water. The assassin froze mid-strike, his body trembling as though invisible chains bound him. He screamed, not in pain but in awe before collapsing to his knees. Marcus saw it clearly now. Her smile was not simply gentle kindness. It carried power. It carried command. The remaining assassins faltered. These were men and creatures trained to kill without fear, yet they hesitated at the sight of a girl who should have been weak. Marcus did not waste the moment. He struck them down one by one until the chamber floor was littered with silence, and only the faint hum of the station remained. His chest heaved with the rhythm of battle, but his eyes turned immediately to Lyra. She stood unharmed, her smile fading into something softer. She whispered, "They know what I am. They will not stop now." Marcus wiped the blood from his hands and nodded. "Let them come. They will not take you while I still breathe." Across the Council's networks, the failure of the assassins spread like fire. They had expected the human to fall, yet he had stood unbroken. Worse still, the girl's power had revealed itself, though only in glimpses. The whispers now grew into shouts. The weakest alien girl was no longer seen as fragile. She was seen as dangerous, and danger bred hope among the oppressed. The Council's fear deepened, for they understood what Marcus now knew. Her smile was no accident. It was a weapon, and it was only beginning to awaken. The smile that shattered chains. The orbital station no longer felt like the fortress of the Council. It felt like a cage about to break. News of the failed assassination spread faster than the Council could silence it. Soldiers whispered that the human had fought off the shadows themselves, and others whispered that the girl who was supposed to be weak had stopped death with nothing but her eyes and her smile. Rumors carried more weight than law, and within days the name Lyra was spoken not with scorn but with awe. The Council tightened its grip, issuing decrees and threats, but the harder they pressed, the more people looked toward her and the human who guarded her. Marcus knew the Council would not stop. He kept his blade close and his eyes sharper than ever. He moved with Lyra through the station corridors like a predator, ready to strike at any moment. But even as he prepared for danger, he began to notice a change in her. Her steps grew steadier. Her voice grew clearer. The fear that had once shadowed her movements began to fade, replaced by a quiet strength that unsettled those who met her gaze. She was still fragile in body, yet something deep within was awakening, and Marcus could feel it in every heartbeat when she smiled at him. It happened one night when the Council decided to unleash open force instead of shadows. A squad of heavily armed soldiers stormed into the residential wing, their orders simple: kill the human, kill the girl, and end the whispers once and for all. Marcus heard them before they reached the door. He pushed Lyra behind him and braced for the storm. Blaster fire erupted, scorching the walls, filling the air with smoke and fire. Marcus fought like the soldier he had always been, his body moving faster than thought, striking down one enemy after another. But there were too many. For every soldier that fell, two more pushed forward. One of them slipped through his guard and charged straight at Lyra. She should have screamed. She should have fallen. Instead, she smiled. The world seemed to shift in that moment. A pulse of violet light spread from her like the beating of a great heart. The soldier froze mid-step, his weapon falling from limp fingers as his knees buckled. Then the pulse grew stronger. The walls themselves seemed to tremble as chains none could see shattered in the air. The squad dropped their weapons one by one, some crying out, some falling to their knees, all overwhelmed by something greater than fear. Marcus turned and saw her standing in the center of the chaos, her silver hair glowing faintly in the violet light, her eyes burning with the echo of ancient power. Her weakness was gone. What the Council had tried to erase now returned with force that none could deny. Her smile had become more than a gesture. It had become a force that bound the will of those around her, a weapon older than any fleet. The soldiers broke and fled, stumbling over each other in their desperation to escape. The fires of their attack still burned in the walls, but their courage was gone. Marcus lowered his blade slowly, his chest heaving, his eyes locked on Lyra. She stood quietly, her hands folded before her, her smile soft again as the glow faded. For a long moment he said nothing, only staring at the girl who had just turned the tide of battle without lifting a weapon. At last he whispered, "So this is what they feared." She lowered her gaze, her voice steady. "They feared the truth of what we are. We were never weak. We were broken, reshaped, forced to forget. But something survived, and now it awakens." Marcus stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder, not in pity but in recognition. He had seen countless weapons in his life, but none like this. None that could turn chains into dust with nothing but a smile. He realized then that she was not his burden. She was the storm the council had tried to hide, and he had become the shield that allowed it to rise again. Beyond the burning walls, the station echoed with new whispers. Soldiers who had once sworn loyalty to the council now spoke of the girl as if she were a queen reborn. Servants knelt when she passed. Entire corridors fell silent when her smile lit the air. The chains of fear that had bound countless species for centuries had begun to crack, and all of it had started with the one thing the council had dismissed as meaningless: her smile, the rise of the forgotten queen. Orbital station that once served as the heart of the council's control was no longer the same. The halls echoed with whispers of rebellion, and the once proud guards no longer carried their weapons with certainty. Rumors of the girl who shattered chains spread across fleets and colonies faster than the council could deny. To many she was still a mystery, a fragile figure sheltered by a human warrior. But to the oppressed she was already more than that. She was hope given form, and hope was the one thing the council could not kill with blades or fear. Marcus saw the change in every step he took beside her. Where once people turned away in mockery, they now lowered their heads in respect. Where once guards spat at her, they now hesitated, and some even dared to bow. Lyra did not command them. She did not raise her voice or wield weapons, she simply smiled. And that smile carried the weight of memory, stirring echoes in the hearts of those who looked upon her. Marcus began to realize it was not only power she carried, but history. The truth of her bloodline was written into her very being. She spoke more openly now, telling him pieces of the story her people had been forced to forget. The Varathi had once ruled not with armies of steel, but with voices that could command both flesh and spirit. Their songs carried through stars, binding alliances, ending wars before they began. They had been called the first voice, not because they were loudest, but because they were the origin of unity in a galaxy now divided by greed. The council had feared this unity, and so they broke the Varathi until only whispers remained. But in Lyra, that forgotten song was rising again. One evening, as they walked through the outer ring of the station, Marcus noticed crowds forming behind them. At first it was only a few workers, then it grew to dozens, then hundreds. They followed at a distance, silent, waiting, as though expecting something sacred. When Lyra finally turned to face them and offered her gentle smile, the crowd fell to their knees. No words were spoken, yet Marcus felt the energy surge like a tide. These people no longer served the council in their hearts. They served her. The council's fear turned to desperation. Fleets were ordered to surround the station. Threats were broadcast across the stars, and decrees of death were proclaimed against anyone who dared speak her name. But even among their own ranks, soldiers began to question. Some abandoned posts. Others laid down arms when ordered to strike. Every attempt to silence her only strengthened the faith of those who had seen her. The galaxy had long been chained by fear, and now the chains were breaking link by link. Marcus stood at her side through it all, his blade ready, but his heart changing in ways he had never expected. He had fought wars for survival, for territory, for Earth, but never for something like this. Protecting her was not duty anymore. It was purpose. He saw in her what others saw, but more clearly, because he had been there when she was given to him as nothing. He had seen weakness turn into strength. He had seen fragility turn into power. And he understood that she could not rise alone. A storm needed a shield, and he was that shield. One night she spoke to him as they stood by the viewport watching the fleets gathering beyond the stars. They will come with all their strength. They will try to erase me before I awaken fully. If I fall now, the memory of my people falls forever. But if I rise, the galaxy itself will change. Marcus looked at her, his voice steady as iron. Then we will not let you fall. Her smile answered him, glowing with that same dangerous softness that had unsettled him the first day. Only now he understood. It was not just kindness. It was destiny. She was no longer the weakest alien girl. She was the forgotten queen of a people the galaxy had buried, and her rise was already shaking the stars. The council had made a mistake greater than any war. They had placed her in the hands of a human who would not bend. Now she was rising, and the galaxy trembled with every heartbeat of her smile. The human who believed, the fleets of the council gathered like a storm across the void. Thousands of warships filled the darkness, their weapons charged and their engines burning with the fury of an empire that felt its grip slipping away. From every world under their rule, messages of defiance began to stir, sparked not by weapons or armies, but by the fragile girl they had once mocked as worthless. Lyra stood at the center of it all, her silver hair glimmering in the light of the stars, her violet eyes calm as if she had known all along that this day would come. Marcus stood beside her, armored and steady, his blade hanging at his side. He had faced fleets before, but never with the knowledge that the galaxy itself was watching. The council broadcast their final warning across the system. Their voice was filled with cold rage as they declared both Lyra and the human traitor to be destroyed. They promised fire and silence, the obliteration of all who dared believe in her smile. Yet even as their words echoed across the stars, entire crews hesitated. Some ships faltered in formation. Some captains looked at the image of the girl and felt their hands refuse to fire. The council shouted louder, but their power was already cracking. The battle began with fire. Great beams of energy lit the darkness. Missiles streaked across the void, and the station trembled under the weight of the assault. Marcus fought like a man who had nothing left to fear. He cut down boarding parties, led defenses in the corridors, and shielded Lyra with his own body more than once. Yet through it all she remained calm. Her presence alone seemed to steady the hearts of those around her. Soldiers who had once trembled in the council's service now fought like lions at her side, their fear burned away by the sight of her smile. Then came the moment the council had feared. Surrounded by fire and death, Lyra stepped forward onto the shattered platform of the station. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Her voice rose, not loud but clear, carrying across channels, across ships, across hearts. It was not only words, it was song. The forgotten voice of her people returned in a single breath. The sound reached soldiers and civilians alike, awakening memories buried so deep no empire could erase them. Fleets that had come to destroy her faltered. Entire squadrons turned their guns not on her but on the council's flagship. The tide of battle shifted in a single instant. Marcus stood at her side, watching as the song flowed from her like light itself. He had seen weapons tear worlds apart, but he had never seen anything like this. It was not destruction that spread, but freedom. Chains of fear shattered across the galaxy. Oppressed colonies rose. Soldiers laid down arms. The council's fleets broke apart as loyalty crumbled into dust. In that moment, Marcus understood what he had always felt but never spoken. She was not his burden. She was not even his charge. She was destiny itself, and he was the one who had believed when no one else did. The battle ended not with fire, but with silence. The council's ships retreated, shattered from within by betrayal and rebellion. The station hung battered yet unbroken, filled with survivors who looked to Lyra as more than a leader. They looked to her as the rebirth of something greater than empires. And beside her stood Marcus Hale, the human soldier who had never once abandoned her. Later, as they stood alone in the quiet chamber where their journey had begun, Lyra turned to him. Her smile was the same as the first time he had seen it, gentle and soft. Yet now it carried the weight of galaxies. You believed when others mocked. You protected me when others sought to break me. Without you, I could not have risen. Marcus shook his head, his voice calm and steady. I only did what was right. The rest was always yours. She reached out, taking his hand, her eyes shimmering with both gratitude and promise. Then let us walk together. Not as queen and shield, not as weakness and strength, but as two who will shape what comes next. And so it was that the council's attempt to break a human with the weakest alien girl became the story of how a smile changed the stars. A forgotten queen rose again, carried not by fear but by hope, and at her side stood the soldier who had seen truth when no one else dared. Together they stepped forward into a future no empire could control. A future born not of chains but of belief, the human who believed. The council's fleets filled the darkness with fire and thunder, but within that storm stood Marcus and Lyra, side by side, unbroken. To the council she had been nothing more than a burden to shame a human warrior, but now she was something far greater than they could ever imagine. The weakest girl had become the spark of rebellion, and the galaxy was Watching, blades and fire rained upon them as soldiers poured into the shattered halls of the station, yet Marcus moved like a storm forged from every battle he had survived. His strikes were relentless and his resolve unshaken, but what held him strongest was not his blade nor his armor, but the presence of the girl behind him. She was no longer trembling and silent. She stood with her head raised, and when her lips curved into that familiar smile, the very air seemed to bend. Her song rose without command, yet it reached across the battle lines and touched every heart. It was not a cry of war, but a voice of memory reminding soldiers of what they had once dreamed before fear bound them. Some dropped their weapons and some turned their ships against the council itself, and for the first time in centuries, the empire that had ruled with chains felt its own grip collapse. Marcus guarded her as she stepped forward onto the ruined platform facing the vastness of the stars and the endless fleets beyond. He saw her silver hair glow in the firelight, and her eyes shine with the forgotten crown of her people. She did not raise a weapon. She did not give an order. She simply smiled. That smile was the strike no empire could defend against. Fleets faltered. Captains wept. Chains broke. The council's command shattered into silence. When the battle ended, it was not because of destruction, but because no one was willing to fight her anymore. The fleets retreated scattered and broken while voices across worlds rose to declare freedom. The galaxy no longer belonged to fear. It belonged to hope carried in the form of a girl who had once been called weak. Lyra turned to Marcus, her voice soft yet filled with strength. You believed when no one else did. You saw me when others saw only a burden. Without you, I would not have risen. Marcus met her gaze and spoke with the calm certainty of a soldier who had finally found his purpose. You were never weak. You only needed someone to stand beside you, until you remembered what you truly are. She smiled again and reached for his hand, and in that moment, he knew that together they would walk into a future where no chains could bind them. The council had failed to break him, and in their arrogance they had awakened the very power they had feared for centuries. So the story of the weakest alien girl given to destroy a human became the legend of the queen who returned and the soldier who believed. And as their story spread, it carried not the weight of fear but the promise of freedom across the stars. The end.